Absolutely. Thank you, Henrietta. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to, I believe this is week 19, and this is the final week of this webinar series where we are discussing how to start your own podcast. Now, technically with these webinars, we could have easily transitioned or converted these into podcasts and uploaded them to a hosting platform, which I'll talk through more later on in this presentation. But we didn't. But what I'm going to show you is how to do it in a traditional podcast style. Now, in today's society, podcast, in the past used to be just you listening to someone talk and entertain, but now podcast also incorporates video. And so I can speak to that. If you have an interest in adding some video to your podcast to allow viewers to watch maybe on YouTube, there's also an additional way to monetize in the event that you are wearing, you are sponsored. Maybe you wear your sponsor's t-shirt, maybe you have apparel that is sponsored and you want people to be able to see what you're wearing during your podcast. So it's all in unison nowadays. It's not just a microphone, a computer, and some music in the background. Now podcasting is in essence a YouTube channel where I can watch you interview a guest or speak on a particular topic, talking directly to the camera. So there's many different styles and formats which I'll walk you through and also take you through the setup. So welcome. And I think today, again, I'd like to share the level of difficulty. Let me just bring my screen up. And if you've been to any of our previous, hold on a second. Okay, there we go. If you've been to any of our previous webinars, I always give you a scale of difficulty from 1 to 10, 1 being the easiest, 10 being the most difficult. I would say the podcast webinar level of difficulty falls, I say in that 4 range, 3 to 4 range. And the reason why is because not everyone is familiar and comfortable with new technology and new software. And this does involve using and uploading and downloading and buying royalty-free music. But I will walk you through that step by step to make sure you understand it can get started right away after this webinar is completed. So let's go ahead and transition to the next slide. Now, again, this webinar is perfect for anyone who's ever been interested in wanting to start a podcast. Well, this webinar also aims to give you tips and tools you need to start and be successful in your podcasting journey. So before my agency, what got me to start my digital marketing agency a few years back, I did host a podcast on Facebook Live, and it did quite well. The reason why I started is my surprise engagement went viral, and we ended up getting 1 million views in 24 hours from my personal Facebook page, and it was it had the same amount of shares as it did likes. So that's how I was able to grow so fast. And the podcast was more or less requested. And so I did the whole entire professional setup of a podcast. I had cameras, I had different angles, giveaways, a storyline, a format, and allow people to call in. And so coming out the gate, it did very well. It just got to the point where it's extremely time consuming, given that it wasn't something I was really aiming to do. It was more or less by customer or public demand. So I have a lot of experience in this area, but also experience in how to monetize as well and how to grow your podcast to be able to sell advertising or potentially sponsorship. I've had major endorsements in my career, and we can talk through that as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So the topics that are covered, as you know, we like to do live walkthroughs. It gets a little boring just going directly through a PowerPoint. So I'll be going back and forth between the PowerPoint, but then also going to the website and kind of walking you through step-by-step how to use some of the software. So we'll walk through the focus and outline of your podcast. I've also identified some links and websites that you can visit that goes even deeper into detail as far as templates that you can download and use for yourself. And then we'll walk through your show format and your script. This is very important because if you want to just go live and be more organic, then you are a YouTuber or a Facebook Live, right? There's no script. There's more or less just topic, and then you just talk. And if you allow people to call in, your format, your structure is really based off of the conversation, which can work as well. So there's a lot of podcasts out there where they let the audience drive the conversation. Like you have the topic and they allow people to call in and ask you questions about it and kind of drive direction. And to me, that's much easier to do a 1-2 hour podcast without investing hours and time into a script as well. Because scripting for a 2-hour podcast is a lot of work, but it can be done. A brief overview of the types of gear for recording, and I'll walk through the mics, some of the setup you need as far as cords and equipment, your computer, type of software you need to record the audio, and then we'll walk through software that you can use to edit and then upload. So the creative points, the artwork, and the music. So we've done a full webinar on Canva. So if you have any questions on how to use it, that's how we'll be referencing. I always reference things that we've used in the past or that I've done a full complete webinar on. So for everything we're talking about, I've done a webinar on even equipment, on how to go more in depth on how to use that equipment. So you can always reference that on demand at the Impact website. I'll also walk you through the royalty-free music. The reason why this is important is because if you are doing a podcast, and I know we have our favorite songs out there that we like to use, and it makes us feel good. We know people are going to like to hear it. They're going to turn up. They're going to get excited. But there's a downside to that. And the downside is that if you're using music that is copyrighted and you don't have a license to use, then you can be demonetized, meaning you can earn money from your content because you're using music that is copyright infringement, pretty much. Now you can get royalty-free music, means you own either you own a license to use that music for free, or there's music out there that doesn't require a license to use, and it normally tells you that within the license agreement. But if you happen to use music that is copyrighted and you upload it to YouTube, YouTube has an algorithm that will detect that, and then it will disable you from monetizing off of your content. And it's horrible that if you got a video that gets, millions of views and you got a part in that video that has music that's copyrighted, and YouTube demonetize your content to where advertisers can't promote your video. So you can make some money from it. So I'll walk you through that to make sure that you're doing things the correct way. House rules: make sure you interact with the webinar, ask questions, right? There's a lot of content. I've been in this digital space for a very long time. I myself own a software company. We have just hit our minimum close for our capital raise. So I've been in this tech space for quite some time. And I know a little about a lot. So if you have a question about something, feel free to ask. If I don't know it, I don't have all the answers. So if I don't know it, then we can most certainly lead you in the right direction to get you the help that you need. The last but not least, don't be hard on yourself, be patient. As I shared, I've been doing this for a while. So over the years or decade of doing this, I've garnered a lot of information and different tips and tricks that can be implemented. So if you don't get it today, it's okay. Remember, I just said over a decade, it's 10 years, you will get it eventually. Just revert back to the on-demand video. So be patient with yourself. Any questions so far? And you can drop it down in the chat, or you can put it in a Q&A. I like to go back and forth. So any event that you have any questions, just put it in there and I'll make sure I will see it, and we'll get the answer for you. All right. So let's keep this thing moving. And I don't think, unless you have some questions, I don't think I'm going to take them, because I do realize that people are back at work. So if I can get through this content 30 to 45 minutes, I will. And I know I always say that it would take maybe 30, 45 minutes, taking a full hour, but I don't think this is going to take the full hour, just of how clean and straightforward a lot of this stuff is. In an event that, when it's website development or different integrations and connections, it can take some time to explain it. But I think this information is pretty straightforward, and you guys will pick it up. So here's the first step, where you want to brainstorm your podcast topics and ideas. So the easy way to do that is you can go to Google and you can put, search podcast ideas and topics. And there are a lot of articles out there that say the top 20 podcasting ideas or the top 50 search podcast topics. And if you feel you are a subject matter expert or a thought leader within that space, then you can execute a podcast. But maybe you have a business and you're in a particular space, and you feel you know enough information about that topic, and you have enough content to where you can create a year-long script of different episodes at 30, 60, 2 hour time frame. And there is no minimum time limit. There's no max. You do the time frame that you feel comfortable with and that your audience wants to hear. Because it's not just about you, it's also about what your audience wants to hear, right? Because that's going to keep them coming back. And so who are you talking to? You definitely want to identify that. What questions do you have and how can you help answer those questions? And that's where it's going to continue to drive people to come back to your content. So for my podcast, it was called That's a Fact with Josh Reed. I had the coffee mugs, I had the pencils, I had the whole setup with the window, with the lights and the flowers and everything. And, we had a whole setup, and I would allow people to submit questions. And again, people's questions can help drive the topic of discussion, where it can reduce the amount of work that you're required when it comes to the creative side. So if you got to create all the questions, that can take more time. But if you have a theme and what you're talking about, and I talked about love and relationships, and people wanted to hear from me, they would just say, hey, can you talk more about this? Or what's your thoughts on this topic? And I had, 50 to 100 different ideas and topics, to where the creative side was already completed. All I just had to figure out is how was I going to navigate and what episode was going to talk about what. So you can do a similar concept as well. Now here's the, what is your podcast format or theme? And then I have podcast name. We'll talk about that later. But the first is the format and the theme. So for my particular format, it was myself talking to a camera, allowing people to call in. Then you have themes such as Joe Rogan, right? Where he's a major YouTuber. He has guests come on his show and they interview back and forth, but it's called the Joe Rogan Podcast. And then you have things like the Breakfast Club radio show, but they have a similar style podcast, so you can listen to it as well. So top podcast formats, you got the monologue, you got the interview. Again, that makes it easier. Then you have the narrative, which combines the interview and the monologue formats, is more of a story. And then you have the multi-host, and that's something where you're really going to have to plan. But one that comes to mind is with the multi-host, and it's one that I used to watch, is Joe Budden. And before, the fiasco with the show, but it was a multi-host. It was 3 of them, and then they had 2 people off camera, and it worked very well. But everyone had a role, and then everyone had a sort of their style and persona and character that they brought to the podcast. And that can help with the creativity and reducing the amount of time. But again, things can happen, right? It's like, having multiple business partners, and sometimes there's a wrench thrown in and you got to figure out how to make it work because you got many different chefs in the kitchen. But that's something. If that's your format, your theme, then you can make it happen. You can execute. Then you got the roundtable style. I'm trying to think of I don't know a podcast that I'm too familiar with the roundtable style, but there are some out there. You have talk shows, right? Those are good. It's the format is more of a roundtable. People pose a question, but they bring a different personality and commentary, and also a different perspective. Then you got the documentary style. But right now, what I'm doing is the monologue. I'm talking to you via Zoom, and if you have questions, you could drop it in the chat or you could put it in the Q&A. And it's the same thing. If we want to call it, the old version of a podcast, I could just turn the camera off, and then we could just upload the audio. You can listen that way. But this is more of the style that's going on. And I got this format from Buzzsprout, which is a hosting platform that I'm going to reference to later on in this presentation, that explains it more in depth with some different examples too. So you want to figure out what is your format and theme, then that's the one you want to stick to. And I always revert back to the old saying, don't start something you can't finish. And the reason why that's important is because coming out the gate with hundreds of listeners. Okay, let's just get to the first 100 listeners. It's going to take some time, let alone thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and then millions, right? It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. The way that you can sprint is if you have either, a large marketing budget or campaign that's driving behind your podcast. If you use the celebrity factor, where you have celebrity friends of yours that have a huge audience, and when they can promote your podcast through their social media, and that way it drives people to listen. But again, you're going to have to keep that up. You can't have one celebrity friend to get all the listeners to come to your podcast, and then the follow-up is not the same, doesn't have the same theme or same feel, because you're going to quickly lose that audience. So whatever you start, you want to make sure that you maintain that format and that theme, and you maintain that style of script to continue out as you build your audience organically, and that's how you get those loyal listeners. So it is a sprint, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint, but you can sprint if you have certain cheat codes, and that's budget and celebrity status to reach the masses, or some good strategic partnerships that can help promote and reach a much bigger audience to promote your podcast to get new listeners. Any questions there? No. Okay. And again, you can come back and watch this on demand in the event that you have a question and forgot to ask, and maybe I said it and it was somewhere in the webinar. You can come back and review it. So next piece is writing a script. Like, now this is very important. It's almost like me coming into this webinar today and not having the PowerPoint. I'm sort of just kind of freestyling it, which 9 times out of 10 is going to be a lot more stressful. I could do it, but it's going to be more stressful, and it's going to be very difficult to follow. So why you want to have a script is you want to make it easy for yourself, but you also want to make it easy for your listeners. There's another thing that we do in the podcast world is timestamp, right? Where you have a script means you have an agenda, and then you could timestamp it to where if you have 10 topics and me as a listener, I'm interested in this one specific topic, you could timestamp it and I can just skip directly to that part within your script and listen to it. So I do have this. Oh, let me go back. I have a couple of links, and I'll drop this down in the chat, where here is a good template where it breaks it out in a template form where you can write your podcast. Let me see what we got here. Did you already have a large following on your Facebook page? Yeah, that's a good question. So my Facebook page, my wife and I, we do social media, and I was building up. I was already known for what my content was about. So I did have a following, but when the video went viral, it just grew. It just, 10x the following in a matter of a week. And the reason why is because the method of growing your audience organically is, I said something that's very important. I had the same amount of shares that I had likes. So I had, at one point I had like 50,000 likes, but I had 50,000 shares as well. So when someone shares content, it then connects my content to their following. So, let's say I got 5,000 Facebook friends, which is the limit. And then someone else has 5,000 Facebook friends. Now I'm reaching 10,000 people. And then someone in that 5,000 has another 5,000. Now I'm reaching 15. And so it's a snowball effect. So that's how it works to where it reaches the masses. And that's what I was saying. Either you have a budget, either you're building your persona and your following over time to where you can immediately tap into it, and people know you for things and they're looking for content. It gets to the point where people are starting to look for stuff from you. I was building a story, and the story was, how I treated my, at that time, girlfriend, which is now my wife, but it got to the point, like, okay, when are you guys going to have kids, right? When are you going to propose? You're clearly going to marry this girl, so what's going on? And so people was waiting for that. So when I did the engagement and then I released the video, it just was like, it just exploded because, oh man, it finally happened. And then the way I did it, it's like, oh man, that was insane. And the same thing is with the podcast. It's going to take time to build it up. And then you're going to have that moment, that catastrophic moment to where it'll just blow up and you build that organic feel. So to answer your question, yes, I built it over time, but it wasn't nearly where it was after the video went viral. So great question. And then let's get back to the script and the outline. I'm gonna put this link so you can reference back to this, because I think this is gonna be extremely helpful. Because even when I did my podcast, I had a script, and it was every Sunday. My podcast was every Wednesday night at 8:00 from my Facebook page. And it took me a couple of days to put the script together. So it was taking up a lot of my time. But if it's something that you really want to do and execute on, then obviously you'll make the time to do it, right? You make time for the things you want to make time for. And I was making time for it, but after a while, I was like, okay, this is taken away from, what the bread and butter So I made the decision to stop it. And, people should actually bring it back, but it's just, again, I didn't create it because it was something I really wanted to do. It was more or less public demand and I was trying to fulfill it, but it was very difficult to maintain it. So definitely make sure you go to this webinar and these steps, because if you want to do it, and I was doing it very professionally, and if you want to do it that way, just make sure you got the time to dedicate and stay consistent, because you could be very successful with podcasting and licensing agreements and sponsorships and reaching and selling products through your audience as well. So let me put this link down. And if you have a question about monetization too, I can definitely answer those too. Okay. So let's go back here. So that's the format. Now here's a couple of samples. I want to play one because here's a sample of the script, right? So you have your intros and you have your outro. So here's where it says 60-second podcast intro script, 30-second, 15-second. So I don't know if anyone's ever listened to, Impact has their weekly podcast you can listen to on a radio show. And Miss Deborah has a standard intro. And while this isn't the exact intro she has, this is an example of what she has for her show. So I'll play this for you right quick.
AJ Finelli. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Gold Spotters, the pod all about cutting your teeth and getting noticed in the music biz. Today, we're taking an in-depth look at crafting original cover art that captures both the vibe of your track and who you are as an artist. Plus, I'll teach you how to create a looping visual to enliven your image on streaming platforms. AJ Finelli.
Right. So that's something where, and for this particular example, they wrote the script and they had somebody do a professional voiceover, professional intro. And you could find somebody today to do that on, if you ever heard of a website called Fiverr.com, I'll put that in the chat as well. So Fiverr.com is a website that has, millions of different freelancers on there. You can look at their score and rating and pricing. The whole concept is that it starts at $5, but it obviously goes up from there. It's like the dollar store, right? Everything in the dollar store isn't actually $1, but they do have a lot of products that are 99 cents. So it's the same thing, but I've hired some people off of Fiverr.com to do some things, logo design, scripts, logo animations. You can find a little bit of anything at Fiverr.com. But if you want some help with the script writing and script production, you can do it there. Or, you can always come back to this webinar. I'm going to show you how to do it yourself. So it really is up to your preference. But that particular person had a nice voice. It sounded clean. She was enthusiastic. And it was like, man, chill with the coffee. But it sounded good. And I listened all the way through. So I'm going to put this link as well so you can get a couple different examples of how the script looks, right? How does a 60-second script, 30, 15, 10-second script look? And then how to execute and sort of the format of the theme as well. So let me put this down in the chat for you and you can reference this. You can have this in your notes. Okay. So here at the bottom says write and record. So you want to have your open introduction, and this is your stamp, right? This is your signature sound effect. Like, musicians, everybody has a signature sound they're known for. The one that always comes to mind that I think is just universal is Rick Ross. Like, he has this sound effect that he does that everyone, when they hear it, it's like, I know who it is, right? And so you want to have that open introduction to your podcast sponsors, the host, and your guests. And then it gets to the point where you can just punch it in, meaning that you have your standard intro and maybe your guests change every single week. And you could just, you don't have to do the entire intro again. You could just punch in the guest name and just export out in your post-production. And then you have your closing thank you and your action items for your listeners. So thank you for listening to the podcast. Please remember to join us next week. If you have any questions, you can comment, shoot us a DM on Instagram. Thank you again to our sponsors for sponsoring tonight's episode, brought to you by, etc. And then boom, it's cut. So, and that's something that I'm going to show you a simple setup you can do in your, in your office and in a place that's quiet with your mic, your laptop, your headphones, and Audition or Audacity, and you can execute that the same way. Much more cost efficient. So now we transition into choosing the right equipment and software. This is one of my favorite departments. And you can get these things fairly inexpensive. So I will show you, I have, get you a nice, these are Audio Technica headphones, right? And they're very good. So these are sort of the entry level Audio Technica headphones, or if you want to get advanced, these are what I use. These are more of your professional grade, still Audio Technica. Audio Technica is top of the line, but still I think it's a good bang for your buck. So I think those are the MX20s. Yeah, the M20X. Those are pretty good. To where it's good sound, it's comfortable to wear in case you're doing an extended podcast. I would stay away from. I have these are what I use. These are my gym headphones, but these are your Sony sound canceling headphones, and I try to use them when doing webinars. I do a lot of webinars, but with the Bluetooth, to me, is always like a slight delay. I don't know why, depending on the software I'm using. So I stay away from the Bluetooth headphones, and I like to go with your standard headphone jack that goes directly into whatever you're using, which is what you see in this example. So I want to give you things I know is going to work immediately as soon as you plug it up. Because when you got Bluetooth, you have lag, and then you got to add delay. And if you're not experienced with this and you don't know what delay means, then it's just going to be a nightmare, especially if you want to do video, because you're going to have to resync everything so the words match with your lips, and that just takes a while. Then you have your iRig Pre. So this allows you to bring audio from your microphone. So here I have the SM7B. This is your top of the line mic. This is what all the major podcasters use. And there's a reason why, because the quality it's very hard to match the quality. There are other professional grade headphones out there that work, but I recommend the Shure SM7B. And so this iRig allows you to easily bring the audio from your mic into your laptop without a whole bunch of extra wires, okay? So, and then the next slide is a diagram just showing you how this stuff connects. And then this, because you can't plug the mic directly into your laptop, there's no connection for it. But there's a connection to plug the mic into your iRig, and the iRig plugs into your laptop, and the laptop will automatically recognize your iRig, which means it's going to recognize the audio coming from your mic. And then you have your headphones going to your computer so you can hear what you're saying, and you can hear what your listeners are saying as well. And that's it. You're ready to shoot your podcast. So you're ready to record your podcast. Then you have your hosting software, and there's a multitude of hosting softwares that exist. I put Podbean because that's one of the most popular ones, but you got Spotify. You can do Apple iTunes, but you have to submit to Apple for them to accept your podcast. And you have Buzzsprout. So there's a lot of different hosting platforms. There's just like a dozen or more. And you just have to look at the pricing, which is number one, and then the type of features that you're hoping to have. Can you monetize? Can people call in? The credits, how many minutes you get, how many podcasts can you do per month? Because they all have different features. And then you need something to, once you have to record your podcast, but you'll have to also edit the audio. So maybe you want to add some treble, some bass. You want to add some condensing. You need to, the way you compose music, you have to do your audio. Maybe you got some sound, some hissing in the background, and you want to remove the white noise. Adobe Audition is what I use, I don't think we've done a webinar on Adobe Audition. I don't think so, but that would be a good one. But Adobe Audition is very powerful. But you also have other free platforms like Audacity as well. So there's the same exact thing. I'm just more familiar with Adobe Audition. And then you also have to pick your music, right? Maybe you want to have some background music. Again, we want to shoot for the royalty free, or if you compose your own music, you can use that as well. That way you don't have to worry about any copyright claims or somebody trying to strike your video on YouTube because they're using music that you don't own. And again, in my mind, you're getting into the podcasting, especially for the long game, is so you can monetize off your content. You want to own your content like owning your masters. So if you do something that's great and use somebody else's music and it demonetized, to me it makes no sense unless you have a different end game and you're trying to get signed by a major. Then that's a different strategy too. So can you remind us? This is great info. Can you remind us where we can access the recording? Oh, thanks, Joanna. Absolutely. So, so this is being recorded, and the Minority Business Assistance Center, they always send out an email the day after with a link to the on-demand video where you can watch it again. So don't worry if you got to go, or maybe if you didn't catch something, you want to come back and listen again. This is on demand, and you will get an email tomorrow, and sometimes send it the same day. But definitely no later than tomorrow, you will get an email with the link to this webinar today. Cool. All right, so this is the setup. So I want to just show you a diagram. And again, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible with the least amount of wires. So as I shared, you have your iRig. Let me see. I thought I had, oh, here we go. All right. So this is what it looks like, right? So you have your iRig and your mic goes into this end, right? And then this is your USB micro USB to USB. This goes into to here, and then it connects into your laptop. Your headphone jack goes right here. This goes into your headphone jack. Put your headphones on. You got your XLR cable that connects your mic. This powers the mic, and that is a pro grade. So you may have to turn your 48 volts on. So you see that switch there, and that's phantom power. So it would tell you. I use the phantom power just to make sure it got that bass and that kick. So when you talk, you can hear it. It just sounds like you should have been on radio your whole life, right? It just adds a personality to your voice. Not saying you don't have it already, but it just adds that extra oomph to it. And that's it. You'll see that green light come on that you see there. When you see that red, that means you're kind of hot. Maybe you want to back up from the mic, or maybe you want to reduce your gain. And it also has direct monitor where you can hear yourself, when you're talking. So I like to hear myself to hear our sound. And that's it. And so that's your setup for your podcast. Again, if you want to get fancy, you can add a camera into the mix and record it at the same time. And then you can sync the audio up afterwards, which is, to me, is a lot easier. Because if you run the audio through your camera and your camera battery dies, or, something happens with the camera, and you think you're being recorded, and in turn you think your audio is also being recorded. I've had this happen, and you do the show and you go back to edit it, and the camera shut off halfway through, and so you got half the episode missing audio. And that is definitely stressful because there's nothing you can do about it. So I recommend just going directly to your computer. And so if you lose the video, at least you got the audio. Does a good computer desktop work better than others like Apple or Microsoft computer? Yes, I would recommend. So I'm using a MacBook Pro. I've always been a Mac person because it is, in my mind, MacBook Pro is geared towards creators, right? It has the right amount of RAM, memory. So I believe mine has, I think this is 16 gigs or 32. I don't remember. But I think it may be 16. Let me check. I just go to About This Mac. Yeah, so I'm on a MacBook Pro right now. It's the latest one. It has 16 gigs of RAM. So I can run multiple pieces of software on it, and it doesn't slow it down. So the whole point of RAM is that, some software requires a lot of RAM, and because it requires a lot of demand from your computer. And so it's difficult to run. If you don't have enough RAM on your computer, it's difficult to run Audition and then run on the internet. And then you're running your iRig because it connects to YouTube, through your USB, which means it's using your computer to run. And if you have too much going on, it's going to continue to slow your computer down. Your computer gets hot, and then it freezes up. So you want to make sure you have a good computer. There are good PCs out there. Again, we're looking at the RAM. So if you got a computer with 4 gigs of RAM, then I don't know. You can test it out. I would say at least 8. And that's what I would recommend. At least 8, and you're not running a whole bunch of things at the same time. So if you are recording a podcast, everything else is closed. Internet browser, because even running Wi-Fi, it works your computer. So if you can hardwire it, it's hardwired, meaning connecting your Ethernet cable. And if you're on a Mac, it has those new USB-C connections. They have adapters where you can connect the Ethernet cord to a Mac, because you can't just plug it in. Other computers I think are good. HP, as long as you got good amount of gig RAM. Lenovo, what else? Dell. They all have their brands. Every single brand has different computer categories that are equipped for certain things depending on what the user is going to use. Okay, so just make sure you have enough RAM, enough memory to run the software that I'm showing you, because if you don't, it's just going to overwork your computer and your computer is going to freeze. And when that happens, what happens right after? We immediately get frustrated and it just messes up the whole vibe. So I'm trying to keep you guys stress-free, because I know me, I have my moments of technology where I'm just like, I just want to take the Mac and just, fling it. But then I got to think about the result of that, and that's dollar signs. So I'm trying to keep you from making that mistake. Next, you want to design your logo. I've done a full webinar on walking you through Canva. So please refer back to that webinar where I walk you through step-by-step how to create this flyer amongst many other different designs as well. And so definitely check out Canva. They do have a free trial, and I believe the trial after that is $20 a month. And you can create your logo. You can also create your flyer for your podcast that you promote on social media. If you got a marketing budget, $20 can get you a long way. It can get you in front of a lot of different people that may not see your content. So definitely want to get you a flyer to put your face out there, put your social media channels out there, and start building a buzz and get listeners on your platform and promoting you to get more listeners as you continue your podcast. So this was pretty straightforward, but there's a full webinar on Canva, shows you how to make these types of flyers. Then you have music and post-production. So this is what Audition looks like. Now, it is, there are some tutorials on YouTube that shows you how to use Audition. Audacity is very similar. It's a lighter version, but it does the trick, and they do have a free version. Audition is not free. They do have a Creative Cloud with a monthly subscription. So you can definitely use Audition to record, and this is what the interface will look like. And this is your audio record button. You can rewind, you can punch in, you can cut things out, you can edit in post-production, and you want to find your music. So let me bring you over to Audio Jungle so you can see what Audio Jungle looks like. And for an example, it says ambient music. And maybe you want to do, let's do vlog music and see what pops up. And you can test it out. Right, so you can see, you can do that. You can do, let's see, upbeat corporate, which is also like that cheesy. But let's
Audio Jungle.
Right, that cheese. So I mean, it has, as you can see, 201,000 different upbeat corporate music, and this is $5. So you can buy a license to use this music in your video, and you won't get slammed with a copyright flag on your YouTube if you upload it, or if you upload it to Spotify, Apple Music. They all will flag you if you're using music that you don't have a license to use. But as long as you purchase it through something like Audio Jungle, or you can go to YouTube and you can find, you can just search for royalty-free music. You can find something you like, and 9 out of 10 it has a link to download that song within the description of the video, and do that. But I would definitely stay away from using music that you do not have a license to use, because it will absolutely ruin your chances of monetizing in the future. And especially if your podcast takes off and you have tens of thousands of people sharing it, and you can't benefit from that because you didn't listen to this webinar that told you about the royalty free, and you used, your favorite Rick Ross song in the background. And now Rick Ross is getting all the royalties. You're not getting anything, but it's your content and your hard work. But you're using his hard work without his permission. So it's like a catch-22. So just make sure that You definitely, any music that you're using in the video, you have a license to use it. In the event that you do get slammed, you say, hey, here's my subscription and my certificate. Because after you buy, you get a certificate that you can download. And if you do get flagged, you can challenge it and just submit that you did pay for a license, and then they will revoke it. So definitely make sure that you're using this tool that I'm showing you. Any questions here? No? Okay. So once you got your music, you recorded it in your post-production, you fix your vocals, and you put the music in the background, you bring it in, you bring it out, and that's it. Your podcast is done. You got your script. Now the last part here, which is the easiest part, is uploading your first podcast. And like I said, here's just a couple. You have Buzzsprout, you have Podbean, you have Spotify. And so if I go to Podbean, this is what it's going to look like. You create a free account. And again, this is where you're hosting so it's like, I can't say remember, but in the event that you was in the website webinar we did was 2 hours, I showed you how to build a website from A to Z. I mean, everything from buying the domain name to putting your website out in the world to where you could visit it after the webinar was done. So I walked you that step by step. But how a website works is you have a domain name, but now you have to figure out where you're going to host it so people can visit it. So here you have your podcast file. You got the MP4 file, right? Or the MP3 file or the WAV file, not MP4, that's the video. But you got your MP3, you got your WAV file. And you need to get it to the world because nobody can access your computer and listen to it, right? So you need to host it somewhere. So Podbean is going to be where you host it. So it gives you a link, and you get to take that link and start putting your social media. And no matter where people are or what they're doing, they can click that link and listen to your podcast. So that's what I mean by hosting your podcast. Same thing, like if you got videos, you want the world to watch it. Where do you host your video? You can't just host it in your file on your desktop. You put it on YouTube. So once you upload it to YouTube, YouTube gives you a link that you can share with people, and they can come and watch a YouTube video. Same exact process. So Podbean would be your YouTube, except it's not a video. It's going to be for your podcast. And there's other different, you got Buzzsprout, you have Spotify. Again, the difference between the three is just going to be what you're comfortable using, pricing, because again, this stuff is not free. So if we go to pricing, kind of give you an idea of what this is going to cost you, fairly inexpensive, $0. They got the free version, $9, $29, and $100. And again, what separates is the different types of functions you get here. Remember, monetization, that's the key. Unless you have a different strategy. It could just be you want a bunch of listeners and you're pushing product to your listeners as well. Patreon, so people can send you money. And so, yeah, just go through the different features to kind of see what you have a taste for. I always like to start with the free version and get a feel for the platform. And if I like it, or I may want to try this one for a while, and then I would try Spotify, then I would try Buzzsprout and kind of see which one I like the best. And then I will go with the paid version. But yeah, definitely check these out, man. It's just a different platform where you can host your podcast. And once you upload it and get that link, you're in business. You just repeat that procedure and that formula over and over and over again. And that's it. Any questions? Was it valuable information? I see we got some really nice comments. Was it confusing? Was it straightforward? Is it easy to understand, easy to follow? Those keys, unless you're listening to us in your car and you got the speakers connected. But yeah, if you don't have any other questions, then this is the end of How to Start Your Own Podcast. Thank you so much for all the information. Absolutely. Again, afterwards, this is on demand. So in the event that you have questions, you can always check out, hold on, we have something in the Q&A. Will there be a replay? Yes, Jocelyn, yep, it would definitely be a replay. And after this, Ms. Deborah Imbach will send out an email. And in that email will be the link so you can watch this webinar on demand as many times as you need to get it. If you have any questions about anything, you can reach out to MBAC, and they will contact me directly if it's something that you guys need help on, whether it's equipment, whether it's software, whether it's the webinar. And if we've done a webinar on it already, we would just send the link and say, hey, check this webinar. We walk you through step by step. And every single webinar is at this flow, at this tempo, where I'm walking through step by step how to use things. Are there people you can pay to do this so you can focus on your main business? Are there people you can pay to do this so that you can focus on your main business? Yeah, for sure. You know, I would check out, let me put the link again, and hold on one second. Check out this website called Fiverr.com. Yeah. And that's where you can find, answer your question, Joanne, and that's where you can find people that are in this, that practitioners that are in this space that can write your script out, compose your music. They can pretty much put your whole blueprint together, and that way you can just download, export the file, and do your thing, which is just be the host. So yes, there are people who can do it. And Fiverr.com I think it's very cost efficient, and it'll give you 100 different people that do it, and you can pick whoever is in your price range. You can also look at their reviews and stuff like that and see what other people think about their services. So check out Fiverr.com, and you can use that for anything. I'm not affiliated with Fiverr.com in any way, but there's other websites too. I think it's Thumbtack is one. There's another one called Upwork. You know, very similar concept, and you can find people to do these services too. All right. So, well, it's been a pleasure, everyone. Henrietta, you there?
Yes, Joshua, I'm here.
Cool, cool. So yeah, that's it. No one has any other questions, then we will look forward to hear from you in the event that you do in the future. But if that's the case, we will give you 10 minutes, well, a little under 13 minutes of your time back in your Wednesday. And yeah, we thank you for your time. Henrietta, you there?